Welcome everybody. This is Michael Cundick. I'm running for Salt Lake County Mayor as a Green Party candidate. And I'm really grateful today to have my co-host Brendan Phillips, who's a grassroots organizer and a big part of why the Green Party of Utah has become what it has become. And also very grateful to have Howie Hawkins, who has been busting his butt for the movement for over 30 years and is running as a Green Party candidate for president of the United States. So welcome, Brendan, and welcome, Howie.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thanks for having us, Michael.
I wanted to introduce myself a little bit better to you, Howie, and to those that are new to our live stream. I was asked to run for Salt Lake County Mayor by the Green Party last fall. I have a history of about a decade of working inside communities, very focused on not just clean air, but also urban farming and gardening. I currently run an acre community food forest and farm. I have started multiple nonprofits and community initiatives around helping people learn the joy of gardening and the importance of resilience. And this has kind of snowballed into this understanding that we really need to embrace mutual aid. We need to embrace bringing our communities back together, finding those places where we can all agree. We all eat food. We all need healthcare. We all need ways to express ourselves. And obviously, for the system to change to the point where we're healthy again and we're connected, there has to be a political transformation. And it made way too much sense to get behind the Green Party because, in my eyes, the two-party system in this country is an insult to our intelligence, and it is not working whatsoever. And I'm so grateful to be a part of a party whose values are actually really what the world needs, despite the fact that we're overpowered by this old and breaking down system. The Green Party represents the values that we need to be bringing into our neighborhood organizing and the actions that we need to take now, and not just waiting to vote, but also the issues that we're talking about. We really need to get on people's minds and hearts. And so that's why I've chosen to run and get behind the Green Party, and I appreciate everybody that's tuning in today and listening to us. And I wanted to start with really getting a better picture of what the Green Party's all about. And I think who better to talk to about that than Howie Hawkins himself. So thank you, Howie. And I guess my first question would be, what do you consider to be some of the primary Green Party values that are most important to you and your campaign at this time?
Well, the Green Party internationally has 4 pillars, 4 values: ecology, nonviolence or peace, social justice, and grassroots democracy or participatory democracy. And that was the original basis of unity when the German Greens formed in the late 1970s. And it's kind of been the North Star for the Green parties around the world. So at the most general level, that's what we're about: ecology, democracy, justice, and peace. And then when you get down to policy, the things the Green Party stands for are things the majority of people stand for in many respects. Majority of people want a Medicare for all system. They want a Green New Deal to deal with the climate meltdown. They want, and if you go through the different rights in an economic bill of rights, they want these things: public jobs for the unemployed, a guaranteed income above poverty, affordable housing for all, healthcare for all, Medicare for all, lifelong public education, including preschool, pre-K, and post-secondary colleges and trade schools at public institutions, and a secure retirement. You work your whole life, you should have enough money to live on in your later years. And these are things we don't have, but the American people want. So I think the Green Party stands for what the people want. The question is, so why isn't the Green Party running Congress? And there are big barriers to getting the Green Party on the ballot. And then we have this psychology that, it's a new party, it can't win, I got to vote for the lesser evil. Of course, we tell people, if you don't vote for what you want, you're never going to get it. And if you vote for what you don't want, the lesser evil against the greater evil, you're just voting for what you don't want. And you lose your voice. You disappear in the politics. You got to vote for what you want. So the Green Party is trying to establish a third option in American politics that stands for what the people want. And the biggest problem we have in American politics is public opinion. Majority public opinion doesn't translate into public policy. And that's what that two-party system does. You got pro-choice Republicans that call themselves Democrats, and you got anti-choice or anti-abortion Republicans that are the Republicans. But when they get behind closed doors, they're agreed on massive military spending and having a global military empire. They're agreed on economic policies that benefit the corporations at the expense of working people. So we're given the illusion of choice, but not a real choice. And we know from public opinion polls, the majority of people would like more choices. They want a major third party. So that's what we're trying to do in this campaign, help build that movement, that for a real independent progressive third party.
Well, I know when you mentioned ballot access obstacles, I know someone working very hard on that issue is right here next to me co-hosting, right? Brendan, you're involved on that level. What's been your experience with obstacles there, and what questions might you have for Howie about reform, independent parties, all of that?
Oh man. Well, the obstacles are many, and under normal circumstances, the obstacles are many. We're required to collect over 1 million signatures nationwide to get on the ballot in all 50 states. And every state has its own rules and requirements to get on the ballot. So it's really difficult coordinating a national ballot access strategy when you have 50 different sets of rules to work with. So that's one of the biggest obstacles, is first just understanding all of the different rules, all of the different regulations, all of the different thresholds that you have to meet in order to get on the ballot. Now this year, we face a whole unprecedented set of circumstances because of the pandemic. And normally, like I said, we would collect 1 million petition signatures to get on the ballot. Collecting petition signatures under the current circumstances is very difficult. Public events have been shut down. People don't want to be approached. So this year, we've really had to take the approach of trying to lobby the governors, lobby Board of Elections to get relief from petitioning requirements, as well as, mobilizing our members to lobby their governor for relief from petitioning requirements, in the hopes that we can get some relief from the government. Where we can't, we're going to have to petition. And so what's already a very difficult undertaking in trying to collect 1 million signatures is going to be even more difficult this year, considering the circumstances. If there was one thing I could ask Howie right now, what I would like to ask Howie is, considering these obstacles in building the Green Party and getting on the ballot, why do you think it's important for people to build this independent party in the Green Party versus just, trying to reform the Democrats?
The Democrats have been the graveyard of progressive movements for over 100 years, since the People's Party cross-endorsed William Jennings Bryan in 1896. And that was the last you heard from the People's Party as a major party. And then the Socialist Party kind of picked up that trend on the left and was a pretty significant force for 30 more years. But then the left decided they were going into the Democratic Party with the New Deal coalition of Roosevelt. And they disappeared as a distinctive independent voice. And that was led by the communists, who were big in the 30s. They called it the Popular Front. Then the old Socialist Party followed suit. They called it the realignment strategy. And their strategy was to push the right-wing Dixiecrats out of the Democratic Party into the Republican Party and turn the Democratic Party into a European-style social democratic party. Well, what happened was, without there being an independent left, the Democrats moved to their right. The Dixiecrats did go to the Republican Party. They got their realignment, but the Democrats started going for the corporate money, and nobody could stop them because nobody was competing for their votes. And so the whole dynamic has been to the right. So the Democratic Party, which you could say was a liberal party from the 30s until the 70s, is now a center-right party. In Europe, it would be a conservative Christian Democratic. And of course, the Republican Party's, going off the rails. I mean, they are now a far-right neo-fascist party. They mobilize their people on the basis of racial resentment and irrational anti-science, messages, and it's far to the right of the conservative parties in Europe. So without an independent left, the whole thing moves to the right. So going into the Democratic Party to reform it, we've had, 130 years now, 124 years of evidence that doesn't work. And we just had two strong examples, the two Bernie Sanders campaigns. The corporate establishment in the Democratic Party, they're happy to have progressives like Bernie Sanders give speeches. But when it comes to making decisions, It's the corporate Democrats that make the decisions. And, you know, what I would say to those progressive Democrats, look, read the writing on the wall. You just saw what happened the last two presidential elections. And if you lose your primary challenges, you've got to line up with the corporate Democrat or they won't even let you in the door. You're a non-person, not persona non grata in the Democratic Party if you don't get behind the one who won. So now you got to get behind Joe Biden, who on policy is even more conservative than Hillary Clinton. Now, what does that do to advance the progressive movement? It sends it to the grave. So I think people got to stop beating their head against that wall. And you know, there's a door next door. It's called independent politics. Come on in. We're going to build a real alternative.
I've got a question for you, Howie, in terms of political transparency, political accessibility, political transformation. That's one of the cornerstone issues I'm running on, and I'm sure you are having similar obstacles, right? We find that most politicians are often from wealthy families or from political dynasties or in the pocket of corporate interests. And the way our political system works, right, people are campaigning for really, really long periods of time. They're able to dump almost infinite sums of money towards their campaigns thanks to Citizens United. And what it ends up happening is most of the decisions that the American public, that our lives depend on, are made behind closed doors after elections have happened by people that are almost preordained to be in those positions because it's so easy to buy elections. And some of the thoughts that really come to mind is the whole political system seems to be decades behind the technology and the social movements that make the world what it is today. All of our media, our applications, our cell phones, our ability to organize can happen so rapidly. Public opinion can really start to funnel in and make it clear what issues are really important to people. And I think that if we had much shorter campaign times, like if it was just 2 or 3 months and there was a limited amount of funds that could be put into it and there was more systems for public engagement, almost like serving on jury duty, to come in, listen to candidates, kind of create a new way to make sure that ideas are being heard and that people's characters are really being explored so that actual representation is occurring. What are some of the things that the Green Party and your campaign are doing to provide solutions to this broken campaigning and political candidacy system in general?
Well, I think where we can build the Green Party into a major party and force in American politics is in local politics. And one of the major goals of my campaign is to get more ballot lines for the Green Party, so it's easier for us to run. Using Congress as an example, if you have a ballot line in most states, it takes a few scores of signatures if you have a ballot line. If you don't have to run as an independent candidate, it takes thousands. You know, it's 3,500 in New York. I don't know what it is in Utah. I know it's over 15,000 in Illinois, over 20,000 in Georgia. And these numbers are off the charts compared to any electoral democracy in the world. You know, we like to talk about, you know, we want to spread human rights and democracy. Well, we need to clean house at home because we don't have credibility in that regard. So one of the things is the presidential vote determines whether in 40 states, the Green Party will have a ballot line for the next election cycle. So local candidates can get on much easier. And in most states, it's 1, 2, or 3%. That's a very achievable goal for us. So that's what the national campaign can do. But I think the most important thing for the Green Party is to really think, how do we institutionalize grassroots democracy? And I think in American history and still today in New England, we have a model. It's the town meeting. That is the legislative body. It's a direct democracy open to all voters. They set the budget. They elect, and they call them aldermen in New England, but they're the town council. And they're basically the executive body. It's almost a parliamentary system where the executive body is accountable to the legislative body directly. And in New England, like in New Hampshire, you get 15 people to sign a warrant article, which is basically saying, we want a town meeting on this agenda item. You can talk about anything from whether the fire truck should get volunteer fire department or the town fire department should get a new ladder for their truck, to should we get out, of the war in Iraq? You can bring anything up. And if we have that institutionalized, I've seen it in New England. The political culture is very different. You have a problem in New England, people say, what can we do about it? They feel empowered. And they can bring it to town meeting. They can bring it to their town. I've lived in California, big state. It's all about advertising. Government is like the city council districts in Los Angeles are bigger than congressional districts. Government, most people, when they think of government, they think of the police. They don't know what a councilor or a mayor is. They never see them. They don't understand how it relates to them. And then I now live in New York, which has, a tradition of Republican and Democratic Party machines. And the attitude of the average voter is, if you're running for office, what are you going to do for me? Not what can we do, like they have some power, but what are you going to do for me? And it's a very different relationship compared to New England. So to change the political culture, you got to have forms in which people can exercise power. Because the disengagement of people, I think, is not because they're so much apathetic, is that they're alienated. They don't think they got any power. And it's even painful to pay attention to public affairs because you can't do anything about it. So why give yourself a headache? Just turn off the news and turn on reality TV or something, or, do a video game. I mean, that's the way people feel about it. So the thing we can do at the local level is we can rewrite our city charters, have neighborhood assemblies, have the city councilors answer to those assemblies, and have a federated system from the grassroots assemblies up through the city council and on up through the state and national level. That would be a real grassroots democracy. And I think with the citizens engaged, they would have power. The problem now, I've heard of this oligarchy study a few years ago, where a couple political scientists looked at about 1,800 different issues where the median voter disagreed with the elite voters, the top 10%. And in almost every case where there was a difference, the top 10% got their way. And that's basically the top 1%, the ruling class, and their upper middle class administrators, which is really the math base of the two major parties. Because even in a presidential election, half the people don't vote. 100 million people didn't vote in 2016. And that's because the average person thinks there's nothing in it for me. Of course, we're trying to offer that with the Green Party.
I love so much that you brought up the neighborhood assemblies and the town hall meetings. To feel empowered like that would just be a complete revolution compared to what we're feeling today. My own, one of the first reasons that I got excited about this was campaigning and working, and this is really an expression of my life, frankly, of having a neighborhood center within walking distance of every community where it's dedicated to gardening, to healing, to mutual aid, to problem solving. That concept is very close to my heart because I help run something called Krishna Food, Forest, and Farm. It's an acre space where we're growing food for about 40 families in the valley. And of course, we're doing it with regenerative agriculture principles. We're not tilling, we're not using chemicals, and we grow amazing produce. But it's also become this hub for community. It's places where we discuss ideas, where we heal, where we look out for one another. When someone needs help moving, or they need access to tools, or they need access to food. I mean, heck, we're growing the food, right? And I thought, what an incredible transformation it would be if every neighborhood had this option to, within walking distance, regularly occurring public events, to have access to gardening, healing, mutual aid, and the democratic process and making decisions together. And I love the fact that I'm running for county mayor because the county has a lot of control over that type of space. I mean, there's libraries, there's parks, there's public lands all over the place that could be dedicated to have these neighborhood assemblies, on top of the fact that we should be untapping the untapped resources of our communities, which is our knowledge and our tools. Like, why does everybody have 3 cars and their own lawnmower when really we should be in communication and meeting each other once again? And to me, it might sound simple to focus a lot on this idea of communal gardening and mutual aid and growing food together, but I think it's the key to resilience, and I also think it's the key to tackling our failing biosphere and the suffering of our living planet. What are your thoughts on like the idea of regenerative agriculture and going more decentralized and small scale and regional, and using and composting and bringing back the soil to life? I mean, you've got to have run across these topics, and I wonder how that plays into your campaign and your experience so far, Howie.
Well, I think to have a ecologically sustainable economy, you want local economies that are diverse, self-reliant, not totally self-sufficient, because you can't grow bananas, in Montana.
And I still want
So-
bananas, let's be fair.
There has to be some trade, but right now we have basically, created company towns, which are dependent on one industry. And then if that industry goes down, or the company decides they're moving to cheaper labor overseas, the town is out of luck. So there's a lot to be said for that in terms of just the stability of people's lives. And also when you do an ecological economy locally, you know what the relationships are to your land and your watershed and your resources. And if you're going to have an ecologically sustainable society, even if you have a national commitment to that with national investment, helping communities rebuild in this way, you still need the detailed planning at the local level. You can't do that from, a converted Pentagon with people in a bunch of offices telling you what to do in Salt Lake City. It won't work. So we need a decentralist and federalist system. In other words, we need a way to coordinate over larger scales, but that should come from the bottom up. So we should have a system of planning, like I was talking about the assemblies, where, the assemblies would set laws, participatory budgeting, say for a city. We should have a planning agency that deals with things like the public energy system. And with respect to agriculture, I was the first candidate to campaign for a Green New Deal in the United States in 2010. And a big part of that is a Green New Deal for agriculture. We want to phase out all the biocides and chemical fertilizers and rebuild the soils, which can bring a lot of carbon out of the atmosphere. That's part of the solution to stopping this climate crisis. And soil can sequester a lot of carbon. Soil, soil is a living ecosystem with all kinds of organisms if you have a regenerative organic agriculture. If you're spraying biocides, pesticides, herbicides, and larding it up with artificial, phosphorus, nitrogen chemicals, you destroy those ecosystems and the carbon goes into the atmosphere. We need to bring it back down. So that has to be a part of the solution. Now, to convert the whole agricultural system, farmers aren't going to do that just because it's a good idea if they can't make a living. So we got to have subsidies to help them make the transition. We need parity pricing for all commodities so that as the cost of inputs go up, the floor price goes up so that farmers can get their production costs covered plus a living income. We need some supply management programs so we don't have gluts in some markets and shortages in others. So we need an organized agricultural system where farmers are assured that they're going to cover their costs and they can go about the business of farming. And when we go organic, the studies say we need about 1 million more farmers. And we also need to get corporate agriculture out and the big companies that are tied to them. So many of our farmers have become tenant farmers. It's like the problem back in the late 1800s. They're in hock to absentee investors. They're in debt to big companies that supply the inputs like Monsanto. So we need to get corporate farming out. The only people on the land should be the people that work the land. They should have the right to use it. And then break up these big industrial farms. But we're going to need 1 million more farmers. And I think a lot of those people are not going to be coming only from people already on the land and their children. It's going to be from immigrants. A lot of the people that have come up here from Mexico and Guatemala were farmers. and their livelihood was ruined by trade deals like NAFTA and CAFTA, and also the support for repressive governments that backed agribusiness instead of the real working farmer on the land. I work with them here in upstate New York. You know, they milk the cows and they pick the apples, but their dream is to own a farm. And you know, a lot of young people that still own farms with their families, they want to go to the cities and work. So these people are ready to take the land. So we need a new homesteading program as part of this. And it should include not just farms out in the country, but urban farms. Bring the food right into the cities. I mean, historically, before we got into the post-World War II period, you had farms right on the edge of cities, or you had developments around farms. And, you know, the farm to market link was short. And we can do a lot more of that. That's the kind of thing we got to rebuild.
Thank you, Howie. I want to remind anybody who's watching right now that our video team here with the live stream is scanning for comments and questions, and we will be looking for some of those and bringing them onto the show while we have you here, Howie. I appreciate you being here with us. I'm really excited about a lot of the topics we went over today. The neighborhood assemblies is huge. I mean, can we just start doing that? Let's do that. It makes a lot of sense for a model overall. We were really privileged, Howie. Last week, we got to talk to your vice presidential pick, Angela Walker, which was a huge delight. And of course, she's doing really, really powerful work. And I think what I'm curious about now, since it's on so many people's minds, and I guess something I want to say too, is I think when people are watching political, especially third party, I feel like people sometimes feel blocked. They're saying, oh, you know, they're thinking about all the reasons why it just couldn't work, or it's a long shot, or, you know, they feel all these frustrations. But the most important thing here is that people open their hearts and their minds to the real solutions that are being discussed and the issues that we as communities can be sovereign and take responsibility for and start taking action today. If there's anything that I accomplished with my campaign, and that I hope that any political candidate does as they enter this world, is that the issues that are important to them and the solutions that they are advocating for are being talked about, you know, and these neighborhood assemblies, these regenerative farming models, helping farmers transition and how that's one of the obstacles that's going on, how it's a major part of fixing climate change, and really the fight towards peace and justice. I mean, that is so alive in really the whole world right now. And I think we should definitely talk about that. What do you feel with the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on and the uprising that's happening in our country and in our world? How does the Green Party measure up to the demands of Black Lives Matter? And what are your thoughts on what's going on with the uprising right now?
Well, the uprising has exposed for everybody that's willing to look that we've had a pandemic of racism before the coronavirus pandemic that's centuries old. And because George Floyd's murder by the police was captured on video, it got people's attention. And then people went in the streets and more people paid attention. And so now we've had demonstrations in over 2,000 cities and towns in every state. And you look at the public opinion polls, you know, people of color have understood this for a long time, but white people's attitudes have really changed, particularly younger people. And so we're at a point where we can really do something about police brutality and systemic racism. And what the movement has thrown up are demands to reform police practices, like no chokeholds, no knock, entry into homes, you know, on drug missions, like what happened to Breonna Taylor, public release of officers' misconduct records. There's a whole slew of these things. We just got 11 of them or 12 of them passed in New York State last week. Another demand being thrown up is defund the police, which means stop sending the police to homeless people and charge them with vagrancy. Find those homeless people at home. If somebody has a mental crisis, don't send a police officer with a gun, send a mental health counselor or a social worker or a psychologist. If somebody's addicted to drugs, don't send them to jail, get them drug treatment. These are the kinds of things that people are talking about. Now, what I think is missing and what our campaign's trying to raise is that the big problem with police brutality is that the police themselves and commit crimes with impunity. They get away with stuff and they're shielded by union contracts, special laws, and basically the kind of hero worship we see, which has been promulgated. Policing in white suburbia is very different than it is in working class communities of color. But the TV shows kind of make the police officer a hero. It makes it look like they're dealing with violent crime all the time or big property crimes, when violent crime is less than 5% of the arrests that are made and serious property crimes are less than 13%. So you're talking about 80, 85% of police work is harassing people. You're homeless, you're vagrant. If you're out after curfew, we're going to make that a crime. If you possess a drug, we're going to send you to jail rather than deal with that as a health problem. That's what the police do. And it's really been designed that way to keep the downscale people down and out of the upscale communities. So that's why community control of the police, particularly in the cities, where they're being abused by the police departments, is a key demand. And I don't hear it being raised too much by the movement at this point. I hope it's not pacified by the Democrats coming up with a few tinkering of police practices and a few token allocations of police budgets to social services. You can eliminate police budgets, put them into social services in the city, and it's a drop in the bucket of what's needed. That's where we need a big federal investment. That's what our Green New Deal does. The Urban League's called for a Marshall Plan for the cities since the 60s. That's the kind of investment we need from the federal level. So I would say also the movement needs to raise its expectations. We don't just want a piece of the police budgets. We want a major federal commitment to doing what's right by these communities that have been excluded and exploited for so long. So I'm very hopeful. I mean, I've been around a while. I was there in the urban rebellions in the 60s, mostly Black folks, anti-Vietnam War, mostly anti-Vietnam War movement, mostly white folks. And when we have had movements since then, it's either been in the Black community or in, the white progressive community. This is a coming together. This movement is multiracial. Young people don't like racism. Very different than an older generation that kind of tolerated it because in a capitalist society that promotes the values of individualism and materialism and opportunism, people felt justified in climbing on the backs of Black folks and other people of color to advance their lives. And I think the young people are saying, we don't like that. And they have a different attitude. And so I'm very hopeful that we can really challenge the systemic racism that's at the root of this problem of police brutality.
Thank you, Howie. I think you're absolutely right on so many fronts. Community oversight boards has been something that has had my attention for quite some time here in Utah, because a year ago, our legislators actually had the gall to pass a law to try to prevent cities and communities from instituting community oversight boards. I think that's something that needs to change immediately. And it's the least, we owe that to our communities to have some say in the way that we do these things. And I'm also a mental health advocate. I've had my own history with mental health. And I think that responding to those crises with police is just absolutely not helping anybody. And such an easy and important fix to make. And of course, it cuts right at the system. We have to be willing to take the reins and get the community involved to make these changes that are necessary. I was talking to
clarify one thing. When we say community control, we're not talking about these review boards, which are appointed politicians and don't have much power. We're talking about an elected police commission that can hire and fire the chief, that can rid the department of racists and sadists, that negotiates the union contracts so they don't have these shields that protect officers who do wrong, that have oversight of police policies and budgets, and either elect them or even have them appointed by sortition, by random selection like juries, so that politics can't influence who gets on the commission. The point is, the community has power over the police department. not just the board to look at them and make suggestions, which is what these review boards have been. It's shifting the power, not just looking at them.
Well said. Thank you, Howie. And definitely well put. And I completely agree. The community needs to have actual control over the way the police are managed. I was talking to a very powerful and inspiring Black activist yesterday who was talking about how the system of white supremacy and capitalism is not really serving anybody, right? And that so much of what our colonial heritage has put into play here, you used words earlier, just like opportunism and materialism and individualism. This whole system is falling apart at the seams. It's the reason that our biosphere and our earth is suffering. It's the reason the communities are so divided. It's the reason that our political system is collapsing around us. And something that, and it also keeps the poor people completely out of power. And that's the majority of us, right? When I say poor, we're talking about the 1%, even the 1% of 1% is such a small number, and they control so much of the world that we live in today. And I think addressing income inequality is also a huge piece of how this colonial system has come apart, and why the police are there to make sure that property is protected and that system can continue to keep poor people in check, which is the majority of our country. And we just had the largest wealth transfer in recent history as well. When this pandemic struck, corporations in the stock market are starting to come back, but it's leaving this gaping hole in the lower and middle class. What does the Green Party have to say about income inequality? If we could touch on that subject for a moment.
Well, my campaign started out with 3 life or death issues: the climate meltdown, the new nuclear arms race, and inequality, because inequality kills. Working class life expectancies are declining in the United States. It's unheard of for a developed country. And that is developed over the last 50 years of stagnant wages and growing inequality. The life expectancy gap between our richest and poorest counties have been growing since 1980. It's now 21 years. And in the last 4 or 5 years, the average life expectancy in the country has declined, and that's predominantly in the working class, basically the working poor and struggling, the bottom half of the income spectrum. So we call for an economic bill of rights to end poverty and economic despair, the right to a living wage job with the public providing a job of last resort. You know, if you're unemployed, can't get a private job, you go to the employment office instead of the unemployment office and get your job. An income above the poverty line built into the progressive tax structure. So if you're below the poverty line, the government sends you money. And once you're above it, you start sending them money on a progressive scale. Affordable housing. We need a massive increase in public housing available to not just poor people, but all people. So you don't segregate the poor and concentrate them in housing projects, but make this an option that everybody can be in. And you pay according to your ability to pay your rent, but you have then, professionals and regular blue collar workers and low income people living together. Comprehensive health care, that's Medicare for all. Lifelong public education, that's tuition free from pre-K and child care through post-secondary college and trade schools. And finally, a secure retirement. Social Security pays about half to get somebody who doesn't have savings above. And a lot of the baby boomers retiring now, they raised their families, their wages were stagnant, housing, healthcare, and college costs went through the roof. They don't have savings. In fact, some of them have their Social Security being garnished to pay old student loans. So we need to double Social Security to have a secure retirement. So that's our program for dealing with inequality. And as far as capitalism and racism and how it doesn't help white people, I mean, W.B. Du Bois is going to analyze that back when he looked at Reconstruction. And he said, the planters and the, white supremacists, that was the slogan, white supremacy. They violently overthrew the Reconstruction governments, took power back, and then they offered white poor folks the psychological wage, that's what Du Bois called it, of at least you're not black. But if you look through American history, when racial income disparity decreased, white people did better. When racial income disparity increased, white people did worse. Because the owners of capital, when the working class is divided by race, they divide and conquer. Both groups of people do less well. Now, white people may get the flu and black people get pneumonia, but they're all sick. And if they unite and fight together, then maybe everybody can be healthy.
Thank you, Howie. Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a lot more signs of solidarity, especially among younger generations. I'm a millennial myself, and it's really encouraging to see so much more coming together and so much more cause for celebration and feeling a sense of we can really get things to change if we can see this thing through. And I've learned so much from you today. I feel like you're just a mentor in this field. You've really done so much work in this and are so clearly so passionate about it. Thank you for being there with us today. One of the reasons that I invited Brendan to co-host this one with me is he's been a huge, he doesn't like to admit it, but he's been a huge organizational force for the Green Party of Utah and really getting us on the ballot here and making sure that we have a presence in local politics. And I want to make sure for people that are watching this show, I mean, you've heard it for yourself. The solutions are on the table. The issues and the values of the Green Party line up much better than anything the two-party system is producing currently. It's time to get involved. It's time to make a difference. And I want to hear from Brendan. I am going to keep a little spot here in a moment for a couple of key comments and questions, but I want to hear from Brendan for a moment about maybe a little bit of history about why he got so passionate about the Green Party of Utah and what things people can do to get involved here locally. And maybe you'll have some wisdom for us too, Howie, once you hear Brendan talk about what we can do locally to build up the grassroots of this party.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the Green Party of Utah. But first, I'll talk a little bit about my experience and how I found the Green Party of Utah. I kind of think it's relevant, and I think some others out there might connect with the story. Most of my life I was kind of apolitical. I was one of those apathetic voters that Howie alluded to. It's not that I'm not apathetic. I was alienated. I felt disenfranchised from the system, And I'd like to believe I was conscious and aware and, politically minded, but I was never really politically involved in any substantial way until 2016. I had kids and kids kind of changes your perception on things, and it makes you feel a necessity to get more involved in your community to make sure that you have a healthy community for your kids to grow up in. So in 2016, I decided I was going to get more involved in politics, and I discovered Bernie Sanders, of course. And the reason I found Bernie Sanders was because I was just studying. I was studying socialism and communism. I was reading about it, and I read something that said there was a socialist candidate running for president in the United States. And I was like, what the hell? A socialist candidate for president? Wow. And that's how I came to find
Democratic socialist, come on.
And that's how I came to find Sanders. And so, I started volunteering on his campaign and working. And it was around March or April of 2016, I kind of started to see what was going on. That the fix was in, that the Democratic establishment wasn't going to let Sanders win the nomination, and that the candidate I supported wasn't likely to be on the ballot that November. And it kind of, it really struck me like, this is the design, this is how it's supposed to be. They bring me in, they sucker me in, and then they put their puppet head in, and I'm just supposed to vote for them. And I said, no, to hell with that. And I wanted to make sure that I was going to have a party and a candidate on the ballot in November that I could support, that I could in good conscience vote for and feel good about. So it was that time I decided, I'm going to get involved in the Green Party of Utah. I'm going to do what I can to make that party and candidate a reality. I met some others here locally. We organized, we started petitioning to put the Green Party of Utah on the ballot. We had to collect signatures like we talked about to put us on the ballot. And we were successful. And now the Green Party carries a ballot line. We're able to run candidates locally. Howie's able to get on the ballot here. And that's, because of the grassroots organizing work that we did. We constructed bylaws. We elected leadership. We constructed a platform. We went out in our communities and we did frontlines work. We showed up at events. We showed up at organizing protests. We built relationships in our community. You know, we're still a fledgling organization here in Utah, but we've grown substantially in the past 4 years. 4 years ago, we didn't really exist, and we've grown. We have a ballot line. We fielded 5 candidates in 2018, and that's all because of grassroots organizing and, you know, on the streets, on the grounds efforts by people like Michael, people like me, people who care enough to put their own time and effort in. It wasn't built by money. It wasn't built by lawyers. It wasn't built by corporate lobbyists. It was built by people who care. That's what makes the Green Party different. It's built by people. It's people powered. It's not money powered. I think this is super important, and especially in a state like Utah, you know, where it's so deep red, our government is so deep red. What that inevitably does is it pushes our local Democrats to the right. You hear it time and time again with our local Democratic Party, you know, we've got to be able to appeal to the moderate, or we've got to appeal to the moderate Democrat. Democrats in Utah feel like their only way to get elected is to basically be Republicans. And so most of the Democrats in Utah, you know, they are Republicans.
Republican right.
And so, you know, I was a part of the Democratic Party. I tried to organize in that system. And it was apparent to me, not only was I not wanted in that system, but that my efforts were wasted there, that there was no reality of me building this alternative system, or me having, you know, even a good conscience about politics, right? Like I can't go vote for Hillary Clinton and feel good about myself. It's just not possible. And so this independent party is so necessary. It's so necessary to get these issues out there that the Democrats aren't going to touch, and to promote things like Medicare for all and a Green New Deal. And we need people to do that. So, you know, I implore all of you, if you want to get a Green New Deal, if you want to push these sort of issues, you need to join the Green Party of Utah. I'm a firm believer that the path to reforming the Democratic Party is dead, and we need to build an independent force, and that's why I'm here. So that's a little bit of my story. I hope some of y'all can connect with it.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm going to check in with the live stream team. Do we have any comments or questions that we should bring up with Howie today?
Do you want to stick to subjects of police brutality, Second Amendment, animal agriculture, healthcare?
Wow. Okay, so we've got a variety of comments and questions and issues going on.
How about this one?
Okay.
Sure, and its effects are more severe upon our environment than the entire transportation sector. Can we shift our style of agriculture to produce more sustainable and eco-friendly plant foods available in a country that loves meat more than anything?
So we got a question about animal agriculture, Howie, and acknowledging that the current corporate food production system with the concentrated animal factory operations are causing more pollution than many other industries combined. What are your suggestions about how we tackle the corporate animal agriculture industry? What solutions do you see around that?
Well, if we're talking about regenerative organic agriculture, there's no place for concentrated animal feed operations or factory operations. That is a ecological travesty. Now, in small farms, animals can be part of the agroecology. You know, they eat some of the material that's grown on a farm, and their waste is recycled into the soil. So, you know, chickens and hogs and so forth, cows for dairy products. I know up here in upstate New York, you know, most of the organic agriculture, most of the organic farmers see that as an integral part of their farm. But they hate the CAFOs. Those got to go. And that is the big danger to the environment from, you know, the animal feed operations.
Yep.
So that's, we get rid of them as part of regenerating agriculture.
Yeah, I would echo what Howie said on that regard. I spent 6 months at an off-grid permaculture farm that raised pastured grass-fed cattle, and it's a tough issue because sometimes we get divided, like vegans compared to like the locavores or the pastured advocates or the regenerative farmers. Sometimes they kind of go head to head because there are some understandable and ideologies from both camps. But bottom line is that the low-hanging elephant in the room that's just crushing our agriculture system and crushing our planet is this reliance on corporate agriculture, which when it comes to animals is all about concentrating, creating these enormous environmental and health problems in the process. And on the vegetable side, we're talking these huge monocrops of corn, soybeans, et cetera. So we got to get rid of those chemical and fertilizer dependent and concentrated animal systems that are just devastating things. And I think we really need to be focused on the unity of overcoming that enormous obstacle to the future of our planet. And I agree with you on that one, Howie. Let's go for one more comment. Maggie, I'll let you make your choice. I got my communications director here in the background scanning for them.
It's not a question as much as just a lot of positivity towards Brendan's experience with 2016 and becoming involved the way he is with the party and the conversations. And then a question is, do you think that legalization of entheogenic medicine will help revolutionize our mental health network?
I think that's a great question. I'd love to hear Howie's take on that. So first of all, we're getting a lot of enthusiasm about Brendan's story, about the reason that we need an independent party of the left and we need an independent voice in politics, that we can feel good about getting involved and actually getting to the work of solving these issues. Thank you for sharing that story, Brendan. I encourage you to get involved with the Green Party of Utah. If you're here in Utah, go to greenpartyutah.com and sign up, and let's get busy working on these issues. Now, the question that got brought up is, what do you think, Howie, about the revolutionizing the field of mental health by the decriminalization and perhaps even encouragement of the use of entheogenic, I'm hoping I'm saying that word right, substances to help with mental health and healing. I think we're talking about the hallucinogenics that are in some ways showing up in a lot of studies and showing up in a lot of the social fabric of our communities around the world as showing a lot of signs of promise. What are your thoughts about that realm of things?
Well, I want to decriminalize all drugs. If you are abusing a drug, it should be a medical problem. I think Portugal's a good model. They decriminalized all drugs in, I think it was 2001. And instead of it being a criminal offense, it's a violation, like a traffic ticket. And you show up at a hearing with a lawyer, a doctor, and a social worker. And they look at your situation and they treat it like, how can we help you? And the result was drug crime plummeted. Overdoses pretty much disappeared. And actually, over time, less people are using hard drugs. So that is a much more humane, rational, and effective way of dealing with drug abuse than criminalizing it and throwing people in jail when they possess an illicit substance for personal use. Now, as far as the hallucinogenics and their health benefits, I think that we need to put more money into health research. We need to socialize the drug companies to take the profit out of drug pushing. Doctors push opioids. I mean, I had an operation. It was a hernia, long story, but the guy handed me a bottle of Percocet with no warning. Now, I didn't take any because a friend of mine had the same operation and said, I got constipated. And it was a hernia operation. So I didn't think that would work too well. So, I just suffered through it. Felt like somebody kicked me in the groin for a couple of days. It wasn't that bad. But he gave me a bottle of Percocet and just said, take these. That is what we got in the medical system. And then, a lot of people are concerned the FDA is making politicized decisions. We see that right now in the coronavirus crisis. They were pressured into saying, well, okay, maybe you can use that hydroxychloroquine or whatever it's called that Trump was popping for a while.
He's still doing it.
That's political. I think he stopped. But anyway, that was political. It should be based on the science. And I can't tell you what hallucinogens can do what. And I do caution people that just because you read it online doesn't mean you should do it. You should consult people with medical training. And I've heard good things. There's particularly forget what it is, but it's a way of getting off heroin. Starts with an A. People have been saying, I've been hearing for decades that is a good alternative, better than methadone. I'm not a doctor, I can't, but you know what I mean. These are the things that should be researched so that when people look at these as possible treatments, they got good information. But the main thing is decriminalize this stuff and don't make it a crime, make it a violation. And then, if you're possessing it and it's considered dangerous, then, you sit down with some people that can help you, deal with your situation. I mean, the conclusion might be actually what you're taking you need, like weed, a lot of people, with PTSD say it helps them. And I've heard that so much, I believe it. But like I said, I'm not a doctor, but in any case, that drug I think should be legalized. It's less harmful than alcohol and tobacco, and they're legal. So we should just let it be, tax it, regulate it. And I would say regulate it in a way that you keep big tobacco, big alcohol, big pharma, big ag out of the business. Let the little people get in the business, particularly the little people that got busted for, selling a little weed on the block. Let them come back. They know the business. Maybe they want to go back into it and have it be a legal business.
Thank you, Howie. Great sentiments overall. I'm feeling like, we've spent a lot of good time together. We've hit on a lot of issues. We've given really compelling reasons for people to get involved in transforming the political landscape, because as hard as this is, all of these issues are connected. And if we're going to step into what I like to call the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, politics is going to transform right alongside it. And we can start having neighborhood assemblies. We can start making these changes that need to happen in our communities. We don't have to just wait for the next voting cycle and sit back and let something up there somehow save us. So really appreciate all of your words of wisdom and your experience here. And I'd love to, first of all, make a plea for those that are here in Utah. If you want to see progressive issues get a broader platform so that we can have this discussion in every neighborhood, it's a good time to support Michael the Mayor in Service to Life. Support my campaign. You can find me at michaelthemayor.com. And I've got an incredible communications team. We have the capacity to reach almost every voter in the county and even on the national level, where hundreds of millions of people are begging for this discussion of seeing this world as a living, conscious being and putting healing and putting community engagement at the forefront. And so this is a great time to get behind campaigns like myself, campaigns like Howie. And I would love to hear one more bit of word of advice here, Howie, about how we can keep our persistence up and keep our mental fortitude and our positivity at play as grassroots organizers are stepping in to uplift the Green Party. What would you say to people who are needing to keep their spirits high and actions they can take to help build up this movement that we all need?
Well, all you need to worry about is if you're right with what you stand for. And if you're convinced of that, even if you're alone, you're standing in the right place. But in my experience, I've been in so many movements. We started out as a vilified minority, from the anti-Vietnam War movement in 65, 66, and 67, to the movement to ban fracking in New York in 2008 and 9, when we were the only people saying it. And the mainstream environmental movements thought natural gas was the bridge to the renewable future. And we found Sierra Club was getting money from the natural gas industry. So all those movements changed. Things turned. We won the majority to our side and we won the demand. I've been through that so many times. So if you're discouraged, just keep plugging away. And if you believe that you're right, you can convince other people you're right. That gets to electoral politics. Look, the biggest kept secret in American politics is the Greens have 129 elected officials around the country. But that's just a drop in the bucket. We should be electing thousands as we go into the 2020s. There's about 500,000 elected offices in this country. Water boards, soil boards, school boards, city councils, county boards, And a lot of times those seats go unopposed or they're in one-party districts because of gerrymandering. So they're automatic Democratic or Republican wins. The Green Party can go in there and be the second party right off the bat. Because if you're in a Republican district, the Democrats usually don't run serious candidates. We do. And then we start an argument because we bring real issues to the table. And if you've been in local politics, a lot of times these local politicians, man, they just run on the fact that they're part of the good old boy and good old girl network. You know, they went to the high school, they married their high school sweetheart, you know, they're part of the Rotary or whatever it is. They're talking about solutions. We come to the table with solutions and then they got to defend themselves. And you know what? We can win those arguments. Like take Medicare for all. You know, the conservatives going back to Reagan in the 60s. Medicare is the first step toward totalitarianism. And people love Medicare. They want, everybody wants it. Even the majority of Republicans want it. Medicare for all. That's an argument we've won. We can win all these arguments and get our people elected. So it's not just a protest vote. Now, in my case, running for president, I got pretty low odds. You know, I'm running against two guys with billions of dollars at their disposal and a corporate media that likes the drama of their horse race. We're going to have a hard time getting the word in edgewise. But at the local level, we don't need the media. We can knock on doors. You know, post-coronavirus or with social distancing and the proper equipment in the coronavirus era. But we can talk to people underneath the media. And that levels the playing field. And you know what? When people know who you are and they've seen you and they trust you, they're going to vote for you. They don't care what your label is at that point. And even in a Republican state like Utah, you get below the labels and you talk about what's the solution to a local problem. And you will find the self-described progressives and the self-described conservatives, the grassroots people, are going to come to common solutions more often than not. Because the solutions are pretty obvious. And the reason they don't get implemented is because some damn special interest is making money off them not getting implemented. So, you know, I think that's the way people need to take it. You know, have faith in your position, go out and talk to people, win people over, and you're going to win. You know, the thing for a group like us is we lose until we win.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Howie, for spending your time with us today. I think that was just what I needed to hear. Really, really encouraging. And I really encourage people that were listening to this to share this video, get involved. You know, right now, so many of us progressives, Green Party candidates, community organizers, you know, we're running a remote show right now. We're running an online situation. And I know so many, especially of my younger generation, all those millennial out there, you know what it means to spread the word and to create influence and to raise awareness for issues. And, you know, I think we need to start thinking a little more long-term, frankly. Our whole society is getting more and more goldfish attention span all the time. Everything's being condensed down to memes, and we're not having that opportunity to have broader discussions and do the hard work that it takes to bring those solutions to fruition. And so please get involved, keep your spirits high, and also get involved in this campaign and get involved in the Green Party of Utah and share the issues and the solutions and the talking points and the discussions that matter most to you. This is the time to do it. Our world is in turmoil. We're in the sixth mass great extinction. We've got climate change barreling down. It's getting hotter every year. You can talk to any farmer and they're seeing those changes in the climate. We know from all kinds of indicators all over the place in society that things are rapidly transforming, and it's the time to hold that vision of a more beautiful world and put your actions where your words are. And that's the kind of campaign that we're running. And I want to get to know you. I want to work with you. And I appreciate you being here. Howie, please support Howie's campaign, support all of the Green Party presidential candidates and the issues and the solutions that matter to you. Thank you so much for being here, Howie. Thank you for being here, Brendan. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday night, and we'll see you next week when we talk to the presidential nominee, Cedanom. Talk to you at that time. Thank you so much.